The title of this presentation is Awareness of and Potential Barriers to the Use of Pre-Exposure Prophylaxis Medication to Prevent the Transmission of HIV, Older versus Younger Men Who Have Sex with Men. The authors are Dr. Thomas Alex Washington, a professor in the School of Social Work, and Mr. Nicholas Malone, a Beard Fellow and student in the Department of Health Science. Background and significance. Men who have sex with men, hereinafter referred to MSM, comprise the single largest group of individuals contracting HIV in the United States, accounting for more than 1/2 of all new HIV diagnoses. These persons have been the single most affected of all population groups throughout all the years of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. In recent years, coinciding with this, there has been a trend for older adults to be at increased risk for contracting HIV. Comparatively, little has been written about why older MSM engage in higher risk practices and, contemporarily, what role, if any, pre-exposure prophylaxis, also known as PrEP, plays in their ongoing efforts to try to avoid contracting HIV. PrEP is a medication, namely Truvada or Descovy, that can be taken daily by persons who are HIV negative. Without a cure or vaccine, PrEP is one of our best tools for reducing new HIV infections worldwide, and it is imperative to increase awareness and uptake of PrEP across all age groups. This paper compares younger MSM aged 18 to 39 and older MSM ages 50 plus to determine their familiarity with PrEP, perceptions of stigma relating to PrEP use, and perceptions of barriers to PrEP adoption. The methods. Eligibility included those aged 18 and older who reside in the U.S., male at birth, and identify as male, have had sex with another male in their lifetime. For this study, which was conducted between November 2017 and June 2018, 273 men were recruited via different social groups for MSM, men attending a local gay pride event, postings on social media sites, and referrals from participants enrolled into the study. The research protocol was approved by the Institution Review Board by California State University, Long Beach. Interested persons were screened for eligibility. Next, those eligible and who consented were enrolled. Participants then completed a questionnaire. It took approximately 15 minutes to complete the survey, and no compensation was offered. The survey instrument consisted of a few brief sections. Basic demographic information was collected in one section. In another, familiarity with PrEP and other PrEP users was examined, as was their level of interest in obtaining additional information about PrEP. Participants were asked about their likelihood of availing themselves of various types of sources for obtaining additional information about PrEP. In the final section of the questionnaire, items comprising the PrEP obstacles scale and the PrEP stigma scale. All demographic variables were categorical except age. Age was continuous. Demographic variables consisted of race, ethnicity, relationship status, educational attainment, sexual orientation, and self-report HIV serial status. Knowledge and understanding of PrEP consisted of items asking whether or not men had ever heard of PrEP prior to participating in the study, whether or not they personally knew any PrEP users, and how accurate their understanding of PrEP was prior to participating in the study once they were given a project-provided explanation of what PrEP is. Interest in learning more about PrEP was assessed by asking men how interested they were right now in learning more about PrEP. Perceived stigma was assessed via 22 items scored on a 5-point Likert scale with responses ranging from strongly agree to strongly disagree. The underlying intent of these items was to explore potential sources of stigma that men associated with PrEP use, in the event they would ever decide to consider adopting it for themselves. The scale was found to be highly reliable, both for the sample as a whole and for all subgroups based on race, age, relationship status, educational attainment, sexual orientation, and HIV serostatus. Perceived obstacles needing to be overcome was assessed via 20 items scored on a 5-point Likert scale, with responses ranging from strongly agree to strongly disagree. The underlying intent and focus of these items was to explore potential obstacles that men might perceive as needing to be overcome in the event that they would ever decide to consider adopting PrEP for themselves. The statistical analysis software SAS version 9.3 was used to perform all analytical functions. Study participants were divided into 2 age groups for analytical purposes, namely those aged 18 to 39, younger men, and those aged 50 or older men. Men aged 40 to 49 were excluded from this paper's analyses so as to base the findings on the most meaningful intergroup differences possible. Comparisons of the demographic characteristics of the younger and the older men comprising the sample yielded several statistically significant intergroup differences. We will see this in Table 1. This was true for race, educational attainment, sexual orientation, and HIV serostatus, but not relationship status. Consequently, these measures were used as control variables in the final step in the analysis so as to eliminate whether age differences in the findings were sustained when the impact of non-influential measures were taken into account statistically. This entailed the use of multivariate logistic regression for dichotomous outcome measures and multiple regression for continuous measures. Results are reported as statistically significant whenever P was less than 0.05. Among older men, perceptions of obstacles needing to be overcome in order to give PrEP use more serious consideration were far, far lesser. Their greatest issues were concerned about the newness of PrEP, precluding scientists from knowing what the long-term consequences of use may be, believing that there are easier ways to prevent HIV than by taking PrEP, believing that there are better ways to prevent HIV than by taking PrEP. Slightly more than 1/3 of the participants were white, 37%, a majority of the sample identifying as ethnic minority. Majority self-identified as gay, 69.6%, but there was excellent representation as well from bisexual men, 16.1%. And MSM, who self-identified as heterosexual, represented 14.3%. The large majority of the respondents, 82.1%, said that they were HIV negative at the time of interview. Younger men were significantly more likely than older men to be HIV negative. Approximately 1 out of 9 men, 11%, said that he had not completed high school or earned a GED. This compares to 37% who had graduated from high school or earned a GED, and majority had a college degree or more. Slightly more than 1/4 of the men, 28.4%, had heard of PrEP prior to participating in this pilot study. Older men were considerably more likely than their younger counterparts to have been familiar with the medication, 90.6% versus 11.7%. Odds ratio equals 72.63. The P was less than 0.0001. Age remains statistically significant even when the effects of race, educational attainment, sexual orientation, and HIV serial status were taken into account. The P was less than 0.0001. Study participants perceived there to be a fair number of obstacles needing to be overcome if they themselves were to give PrEP use greater consideration. The mean was 3.10 on a 1 to 5 scale with a standard deviation of 0.5. Younger men perceived a greater number of obstacles precluding them from exploring PrEP use further when compared to their older counterparts. 3.44 versus 1.83, and the P was less than 0.001. Age was the strongest contributor to the multivariate equation that also examined the effects of race, educational attainment, sexual orientation, and HIV serial status. The P was less than 0.0001. In summary, compared to younger MSM, older MSM were less interested in learning more about PrEP and more averse to using existing resources to learn more about PrEP. Yet older men perceived less stigma relating to PrEP and fewer obstacles needing to be overcome in order to give serious consideration to PrEP adoption. These differences remained when race, educational attainment, sexual orientation, and HIV serial status were controlled. Age-appropriate PrEP educational campaigns are advisable in order to reach older MSM and encourage more of them to consider PrEP adoption. Older MSM should also be encouraged to engage in efforts to promote PrEP use among younger MSM. Thank you.